My name is Hanna. I'm 34 years old, and this is the story of how I was betrayed by the one person I trusted the most, my own family. If you've ever wondered what winning millions could actually cost you, hit that subscribe button and give this video a like, because what I'm about to share will change how you see money and family forever. Have you ever had a moment that completely flipped your world upside down? Well, imagine holding a lottery ticket worth $12 million and realizing that telling your family might be the biggest mistake of your life. This isn't just another feel-good lottery story. This is about discovering who people really are when money enters the picture. You won't believe what happened when I decided to test my family's loyalty before revealing my windfall. I had always thought that blood was thicker than water, that family would always have your back no matter what. But sometimes life has a way of showing you truths you never wanted to see. The moment I realized I had won, my first instinct wasn't joy or excitement. It was fear. Fear of what this money would do to the people I loved most. Picture this. You're holding a piece of paper that could solve every financial problem you've ever had. Your mortgage, your student loans, your car payments, all of it could disappear with one bank deposit. But instead of feeling relieved, you feel this crushing weight on your chest. Because deep down, you know that money changes people, and you're about to find out exactly how much it changes the ones closest to you. The strangest part about winning the lottery wasn't the money itself. It was the immediate realization that I couldn't trust anyone with this secret, not even my own mother, who had raised me to believe that family comes first. As I sat in my car outside the gas station where I had bought the winning ticket, staring at those life-changing numbers, I made a decision that would test every relationship I had ever valued. By the way, let me know in the comments where you're watching this from. I love connecting with people from all over the world, but that's when things took a turn I never saw coming. What followed next would challenge everything I thought I knew about loyalty, love, and what family really means. The decision I was about to make would reveal secrets about my family that had been hidden for decades. It would force me to confront painful truths about the people who raised me and taught me about unconditional love. Little did I know that this lottery ticket would become the key to unlocking the real character of everyone I thought I knew, and the results would be more shocking than any jackpot I could have imagined. Before you judge my decision to hide the money, let me take you back to what my life looked like just 48 hours before everything changed. If you're someone who's ever struggled paycheck to paycheck, smash that like button because you'll understand exactly what I'm talking about. Have you ever had to choose between paying rent or buying groceries? Drop a comment and let me know, because that was my reality for years. I was working 2 jobs just to keep my head above water, and my family knew every detail of my financial struggles. They watched me struggle, but somehow, help never seemed to come from the people who claimed to love me most. My daily routine was like being a hamster on a wheel, running as fast as I could but never actually getting anywhere. I'd wake up at 5 a.m. to work my morning shift at the coffee shop, rush home to change, then head to my evening job at a call center. Weekends weren't for rest. They were for catching up on bills, grocery shopping with coupons, and trying to figure out how to make $20 stretch until my next paycheck. Every month was a mathematical puzzle where the numbers never quite added up right. Living paycheck to paycheck isn't just about being broke. It's about the constant anxiety that sits in your stomach like a rock. You become an expert at calculating exactly how much gas you can afford, which bills you can postpone without getting shut off, and how to make a single meal last for 3 days. I remember one particularly rough month when my car broke down, and I had to choose between fixing it or paying my electric bill. That's when I learned that having family doesn't automatically mean having support. The most painful part wasn't the financial stress itself. It was watching my family live their comfortable lives while I struggled. My parents had their house paid off. My sister and her husband both had stable careers. And my brother had just bought a new truck. Yet somehow, when I needed help, there was always an excuse. "Oh, money's tight for everyone," they'd say. Or, "You need to learn to manage better." But that was about to change in the most unexpected way, and what I discovered about them would shatter everything I thought I knew about family loyalty. The irony of my situation wasn't lost on me even then. I was surrounded by family members who had achieved financial stability, yet I felt more alone in my struggles than if I had no family at all. There's something particularly devastating about being ignored by people who have the power to help you but choose not to. It's like drowning while people on the shore watch you struggle and offer advice instead of throwing you a rope. This pattern of emotional abandonment had been going on for so long that I had started to believe it was normal, that maybe I was asking for too much, or that I somehow deserved to struggle alone. If you're watching this and thinking, surely family is different, hit that subscribe button because I'm about to show you exactly how wrong that assumption can be. Have you ever noticed how family members seem to have selective hearing when you need help, but perfect memory when they need something from you? Let me know in the comments if you've experienced this, because I want you to understand that you're not alone in this struggle. My family dynamics were complicated long before money ever entered the picture. And looking back, maybe that should have been my first warning sign. But when you grow up in dysfunction, it becomes your normal, and you don't realize how toxic it really is until something forces you to see it clearly. My mother had this way of making every conversation about herself, even when I was the one reaching out for support. If I called to tell her about a problem at work, she'd somehow turn it into a story about her own career struggles from 30 years ago. My father was emotionally distant, the type of man who showed love through criticism disguised as tough love. He believed that helping me too much would make me weak, so he chose to let me struggle, thinking it would build character. My siblings had learned this same pattern. Love was conditional, and support came with strings attached. The family dinner table was like a courtroom where everyone was both judge and jury, but never the defendant. Every conversation felt like a competition to see who could appear the most successful while secretly judging everyone else's failures. My sister would brag about her latest vacation while I was quietly calculating whether I could afford to split the dinner check. My brother would complain about his property taxes while I was wondering if I'd have enough gas money to get home. They weren't cruel people, but they had created this bubble where other people's struggles weren't really their responsibility. What hurt the most was the double standard that existed within our family dynamic. When my sister needed help with her down payment, the family rallied together to make it happen. When my brother's business was struggling, everyone pitched in without question. But when I needed support, suddenly everyone had opinions about my life choices and lectures about financial responsibility. It was like being part of a club where everyone else had the membership benefits, but I was always paying dues without receiving any of the perks. This pattern had been going on for years, and I had accepted it as normal until something happened that would expose the truth about their priorities. The most devastating realization was understanding that my family had unconsciously assigned me the role of the struggling one, the person whose problems were expected and whose success would somehow disrupt their comfortable narrative. They had grown comfortable with my financial difficulties because it made them feel better about their own situations. My struggles validated their choices and made them feel generous when they occasionally offered small gestures of help that cost them nothing. I was like a charity case that made them feel good about themselves without requiring any real sacrifice or change in their comfortable lifestyles. Now, here's where the story gets interesting. So make sure you're subscribed, because what happens next will blow your mind. Have you ever had a moment where your entire life changed in the span of 5 seconds? Share your story in the comments, because I want to connect with others who've experienced these life-altering moments. Picture this. It's a rainy Tuesday evening. I just finished my double shift, and I'm exhausted beyond words. I stopped at the same gas station I always do, bought the same lottery numbers I'd been playing for 3 years. My birthday, my mom's birthday, and the date I graduated college. I honestly bought those tickets more out of habit than hope. I didn't check the numbers right away because, let's be honest, when you've never won more than $5, you don't expect miracles. It was actually 3 days later when I was cleaning out my purse that I found the crumpled ticket shoved between old receipts and grocery store coupons. I almost threw it away without checking, but something made me stop. Maybe it was the way the afternoon light was hitting my kitchen table, or maybe it was just divine timing, but I decided to scan it with the lottery app on my phone just to be sure. The moment those numbers matched, time stopped completely. I'm talking about that kind of silence where you can hear your own heartbeat pounding in your ears. $12 million. The screen kept showing the same numbers, and I kept thinking the app was broken or that I was reading it wrong. I must have checked and rechecked those numbers 20 times before the reality started to sink in. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely hold my phone, and I had to sit down because my legs felt like they were going to give out beneath me. But here's the thing that nobody tells you about winning the lottery. The first emotion isn't joy or excitement. It's pure, overwhelming terror. Terror because you realize that your life just became incredibly complicated in ways you never imagined. Terror because you know that everyone around you is about to see you differently. And terror because you suddenly have something that everyone wants, and you don't know who you can trust anymore. That's when I made the decision that would change everything, and what I discovered about my family's true nature would haunt me for months to come. The weight of that moment was unlike anything I had ever experienced before. It wasn't just about the money. It was about the sudden realization that I now held the power to change not just my life, but the lives of everyone around me. With great wealth comes great responsibility, but also great vulnerability. I understood in that instant why lottery winners often report feeling isolated and paranoid. Money doesn't just change your circumstances. It changes how every single person in your life sees you and interacts with you. The innocent relationships of my past were about to become complicated by questions of motive, fairness, and expectation that would poison every future interaction. If you think I'm crazy for what I did next, hit that like button and subscribe, because I need you to understand the psychology behind my choice. Have you ever been in a situation where you knew that sharing good news might actually ruin your relationships? Tell me in the comments, because I want to know if you've felt this same fear. Sitting there with that winning ticket, my mind immediately went to all the times my family had disappointed me when I needed them most. I thought about my sister's wedding, where I was expected to contribute to the gift even though I was barely making rent, or my brother's birthday party, where I felt judged for bringing a homemade cake instead of something expensive from the bakery. The decision to hide my win wasn't made out of greed or selfishness. It was made out of self-preservation. I had watched enough families get torn apart by money to know that sudden wealth can turn loved ones into strangers overnight. Think about it like this. If you suddenly had a rare diamond, would you immediately tell everyone in your neighborhood? Or would you be careful about who you trusted with that information? That's exactly how I felt about my lottery win. I knew that the moment I revealed this secret, every interaction with my family would be tainted by the knowledge of what I had. I spent the next week living in this strange bubble where I was technically a millionaire, but I was still getting up at 5 a.m. for my coffee shop job. It was surreal. I'd serve customers their morning coffee while knowing I could buy the entire franchise if I wanted to. But I needed time to think, time to process what this money meant for my future and my relationships. I realized that this windfall was also an opportunity to learn something valuable about the people in my life. Something I might never get the chance to discover otherwise. The more I thought about it, the more I realized that hiding the money wasn't just about protecting myself. It was about protecting the relationships I still hoped could be genuine. Money has this way of poisoning everything it touches, turning love into calculation and generosity into expectation. I wanted to know who my family really was when they thought I had nothing to offer them. Little did I know that this decision would reveal truths about my loved ones that would change our relationships forever, and the test I was about to conduct would show me exactly where I stood in their hearts. During those days of secret wealth, I found myself observing my family with new eyes, looking for clues about their true character that I had missed before. Every interaction became a small experiment in human nature. When my sister complained about her grocery budget while planning an expensive spa weekend, I wondered what she would say if she knew I could pay for both without thinking twice. When my parents mentioned their upcoming cruise while knowing I was struggling, I questioned what their priorities really were. The hiding wasn't just about protecting my secret, it was about creating the space to see people as they truly were when they thought nothing had changed. Here's where my story takes a turn that might shock you. So if you're curious about human nature, subscribe and like this video, because what I discovered will make you question everything. Have you ever wondered what would happen if you tested the people closest to you when you actually had the power to help yourself? Share your thoughts below, because this experiment changed my entire perspective on family loyalty. I decided to conduct what I now call the loyalty test. I would approach each family member asking for a small amount of financial help, acting as if I was in desperate need. The amount wasn't huge, just enough to see who would step up and who would make excuses. The plan was simple, but revealing. I would tell each family member that I was facing a financial emergency and needed to borrow money. I chose different amounts for different people based on what I knew they could afford. I asked my parents for $800, my sister for $500, and my brother for $300. I even reached out to some extended family members with smaller requests. The beauty of this test was that it wasn't about the money itself. I already had more than I knew what to do with. It was about discovering who would prioritize my well-being over their own convenience. I crafted each request carefully, making sure to explain my situation in a way that sounded urgent but not dramatic. I told them I had unexpected medical bills that insurance wouldn't cover, and I needed help to avoid damaging my credit score. This wasn't some elaborate scheme to trick them. It was a mirror that would reflect their true character back to me. I promised to pay them back within 2 months, which made the request reasonable and temporary. In my mind, anyone who truly cared about me would find a way to help, even if it meant making small sacrifices. What I didn't expect was how quickly this test would reveal the fault lines in my family relationships. Each phone call became a window into their priorities, their values, and their perception of me as a person. Some responses came immediately, others took days of thinking about it, and some never came at all. But the pattern that emerged was more telling than any conversation we had ever had about love, loyalty, or family bonds. The results of this test would force me to confront a painful truth about the people I had spent my entire life trying to please, and what I learned would ultimately reshape my understanding of what family really means. The hardest part about conducting this test was maintaining my composure during each conversation. Every phone call required me to act vulnerable and desperate, while secretly knowing I had the power to solve not just my own problems, but theirs as well. It was like playing a role in a play where only I knew the script, watching their reactions and listening to their excuses while sitting on life-changing wealth. The emotional toll of pretending to need help from people I was beginning to suspect didn't actually care about my well-being was exhausting in ways I hadn't anticipated. If you want to see how money really reveals people's character, subscribe to this channel and hit that like button, because what my family did next will absolutely shock you. Have you ever asked someone for help only to be met with excuses that made you question your worth as a person? Let me know in the comments if you've experienced this kind of rejection, because I want you to know that your feelings are valid and you're not asking for too much. The responses I got from my family members were like receiving a masterclass in human selfishness. And each conversation taught me something new about who these people really were beneath their loving facade. What hurt the most wasn't the rejection itself. It was the creativity they showed in finding reasons why they couldn't help. My mother's response came first, and it was a work of art in manipulation and guilt-tripping. She told me that $800 was a lot of money, and that she and my father were already stretched thin with their own expenses. This woman, who had just returned from a 2-week cruise to Alaska, was telling me she couldn't afford to help her daughter with a medical emergency. She suggested I look into payment plans with the hospital, apply for financial assistance programs, or maybe consider asking my employer for an advance. The irony wasn't lost on me. The woman who had taught me that family always comes first was essentially telling me to figure it out on my own. My sister's reaction was even more revealing because it came with a side of judgment that I hadn't expected. She explained that she and her husband were saving for their dream kitchen renovation and couldn't afford to loan me the money right now. But then she proceeded to give me a 20-minute lecture about financial planning and emergency funds. "You really should have been saving for situations like this," she said, completely ignoring the fact that I had been living paycheck to paycheck for years. It was like being criticized for drowning by someone standing safely on the shore. My brother's response was perhaps the most honest, which somehow made it hurt even more. He simply said no without any elaborate explanation or false sympathy. "I can't help you out right now," was his entire response when I explained my situation. No follow-up questions about my health, no concern about how I was handling the stress, just a flat rejection delivered with the emotional warmth of a parking meter. But there was one family member whose response would restore my faith in humanity, even as it broke my heart about everyone else. What struck me most about these conversations was how quickly each family member found ways to make my emergency about their own financial comfort and priorities. None of them asked detailed questions about my health, offered emotional support, or suggested alternative ways they might help if money was truly tight. Instead, they treated my crisis like an inconvenience that was interrupting their own plans and goals. The speed with which they dismissed my needs revealed that helping me had never been a priority for any of them, and their willingness to let me suffer rather than adjust their own comfort levels showed me exactly where I ranked in their lives. This is where the story gets really heavy, so if you're still with me, please subscribe and give this video a thumbs up, because sharing this pain isn't easy for me. Have you ever felt completely alone even when surrounded by people who are supposed to love you? Drop a comment and tell me about a time when you felt abandoned, because I want you to know that your feelings matter and you deserve better. The rejection from my family hit me harder than any financial struggle I had ever faced, because money problems are temporary, but discovering that your family doesn't prioritize your well-being, that cuts deep into your soul. Each no felt like a small death, killing off pieces of the relationships I had treasured my entire life. The worst part wasn't just the rejection. It was the realization that I had been fooling myself about who these people really were. For 34 years, I had convinced myself that my family loved me unconditionally, that blood meant something special, that we were a team. But this test revealed that their love had always been conditional, based on what was convenient for them rather than what was right. It's like spending your whole life believing you're looking at yourself in a mirror, only to discover it was just a window, and strangers have been watching you from the other side all along. I found myself crying at the strangest moments, in the grocery store checkout line, during my morning coffee routine, even while brushing my teeth. The grief wasn't just about the money they refused to lend, it was about mourning the family I thought I had. I was grieving the loss of my illusions, the death of my naive belief that family meant unconditional support. It felt like attending a funeral for relationships that were still technically alive, but had lost their meaning. The weight of this emotional discovery was heavier than any financial burden I had ever carried. Sleep became impossible because my mind kept replaying every interaction, looking for signs I had missed over the years. How many times had they shown me who they really were, and I had chosen to ignore it? How many red flags had I painted green because I desperately wanted to believe in the fairy tale of family loyalty? The emotional impact of this test went far beyond disappointment. It was a complete reconstruction of my understanding of love, loyalty, and what it means to be there for someone. But just when I thought I had learned the worst about human nature, one person would prove that genuine love still existed in the most unexpected place. The isolation I felt during this period was unlike anything I had experienced before. It wasn't just loneliness. It was the devastating realization that the people I had counted on my entire life were essentially strangers who happened to share my DNA. I began to understand why some people create chosen families instead of relying on biological ones. The betrayal wasn't dramatic or obvious. It was quiet and consistent, like a slow leak that eventually drains all the warmth from a relationship. I started questioning every childhood memory, every family gathering, wondering how much of the love I remembered was real and how much was just my desperate need to belong somewhere. If you believe that genuine kindness still exists in this world, please subscribe and like this video because I'm about to introduce you to the one person who restored my faith in humanity. Have you ever met someone who gives without expecting anything in return, even when they have very little to give? Tell me about that person in the comments because we need to celebrate these rare souls who still exist among us. My Aunt Martha was my mother's younger sister, a woman who had always lived modestly but had a heart bigger than anyone I knew. She was the one family member I almost didn't contact because I knew she had the least to give, and I didn't want to burden her with my problems. Aunt Martha lived in a small apartment across town, worked part-time at a local library, and had been widowed for 5 years. She drove a 15-year-old Honda Civic, shopped with coupons religiously, and I knew that every dollar mattered in her budget. When I called her with my fake emergency, my heart was already breaking because I knew that if she offered to help, it would mean real sacrifice for her. I almost hung up the phone before she answered because the guilt of even testing someone so genuine felt wrong, but I needed to know. I needed to see if there was still real love left in my family. Her response came without hesitation, and it completely destroyed me emotionally. "Oh, honey, of course I'll help you," she said immediately, before I had even finished explaining my situation. She didn't ask for details about my financial management, didn't lecture me about emergency funds, didn't make me feel small for needing help. Instead, she asked if I was okay, if I was scared, and whether I needed someone to come with me to the hospital. She said she could have the money transferred to my account within an hour, and that I shouldn't worry about paying her back until I was completely better. But here's what broke my heart the most. She mentioned that she would need to skip her monthly dinner out with her church friends to afford helping me in, but she said it like it was no big deal. This woman, who had so little, was willing to give up one of her few pleasures just to help me with what she thought was a medical emergency. She was treating my crisis like it was her crisis, offering not just money, but emotional support and genuine care. In that moment, I realized I had found the only person in my family who understood what love actually means, and her generosity would soon inspire me to make a decision that would change both of our lives forever. What made Aunt Martha's response even more powerful was the way she continued to check on me throughout the following days. She called to ask how I was feeling, whether the doctors had given me good news, and if I needed anything else. She treated my fabricated medical crisis with the same concern she would have shown for her own health problems. Her genuine worry and ongoing support stood in stark contrast to the silence from the rest of my family, who had dismissed my emergency and moved on with their lives without a second thought. Aunt Martha's consistent care showed me what real family support looks like, and it made the contrast with everyone else's selfishness even more painful. You won't believe what happened when I decided to tell Aunt Martha the truth. So make sure you're subscribed and have hit that like button, because this moment changed everything. Have you ever had to confess something that you were terrified would disappoint someone you love? Share your experience in the comments, because I want to connect with others who face these difficult conversations. After 3 sleepless nights of guilt over accepting her offer to help, I knew I couldn't let this wonderful woman sacrifice her dinner money for my fake emergency. The weight of her genuine kindness was crushing me, and I realized that she deserved to know the truth, even if it meant risking her judgment. I drove to her apartment on a Saturday morning with my hands shaking and my heart racing faster than it had when I first discovered I'd won. I had rehearsed this conversation 100 times in my head, but nothing had prepared me for the reality of sitting across from someone who had shown me pure love and having to admit that I had lied to test her character. When I knocked on her door, she welcomed me with the same warm smile she'd had since I was a child, and she immediately asked how I was feeling and whether the medical situation was improving. Sitting at her small kitchen table, surrounded by photos of family gatherings where she always looked happy despite having the least, I took a deep breath and told her everything. I explained about the lottery win, about my decision to hide it, about testing the family, and about how her response had been the only one that showed genuine love. I watched her face carefully, expecting anger, disappointment, or hurt, but instead, I saw something I hadn't anticipated: understanding mixed with a sad kind of wisdom that only comes from years of watching family dynamics play out. Her reaction was more profound than I could have imagined, and it taught me something about grace that I'll carry with me forever. She listened quietly, nodding occasionally, and when I finished explaining, she reached across the table and took my hands in hers. "Honey," she said softly, "I'm not surprised by their reactions, and I'm not disappointed in you for testing us. You've been hurt by this family before, and you needed to know who you could trust with something this big." Her wisdom and forgiveness in that moment showed me what unconditional love actually looks like, and what she said next would inspire me to completely rethink how I wanted to use my newfound wealth. The relief I felt after confessing to Aunt Martha was overwhelming, but it was mixed with a deep sadness about what her reaction revealed about the rest of my family. Her lack of surprise at their selfish responses confirmed what I had suspected but didn't want to admit: that this pattern of family dysfunction had been visible to others for years. Aunt Martha had watched her own sister and nephews treat me with casual indifference, and she had probably felt helpless to change the dynamic. Her immediate forgiveness of my deception showed me that she understood the pain that had driven me to test them in the first place, and her empathy in that moment healed wounds I didn't even know I had. If you think money just changes bank account numbers, subscribe and like this video because I'm about to show you how it actually reveals the deepest truths about human character. Have you ever noticed how people's true priorities become crystal clear when money is involved? Let me know in the comments what you've observed about how money affects relationships, because this experience taught me lessons I never expected to learn. This whole situation forced me to confront some uncomfortable truths about my family that I had been avoiding for years. Money didn't change who they were. It simply revealed who they had always been underneath the surface. The lottery win became like an X-ray machine for relationships, showing me the broken bones that had been hidden beneath seemingly healthy skin. My family's responses weren't surprising when I really thought about it. They were completely consistent with patterns I had observed my entire life but had chosen to ignore. When my sister prioritized her kitchen renovation over my supposed medical emergency, it wasn't out of character. It was exactly who she had always been. When my parents chose their financial comfort over their daughter's crisis, they were simply showing me the same priorities they had demonstrated in countless smaller ways throughout my childhood. What shocked me most was realizing how long I had been making excuses for their behavior. I had spent decades explaining away their selfishness, telling myself that they showed love differently, that they were just practical people who believed in self-reliance. But money has this brutal honesty about it. It strips away all the pretty words and social niceties and shows you exactly where you rank in someone's priorities. A medical emergency should have trumped a vacation fund or a home renovation, but for my family, my well-being was negotiable while their wants were non-negotiable. The hardest pill to swallow was accepting that I had been seeking validation and love from people who were fundamentally incapable of giving it unconditionally. It's like trying to draw water from a well that's been dry for years. You can keep lowering the bucket, but you'll never get what you need. This realization was devastating, but also liberating, because it freed me from the exhausting cycle of trying to earn love from people who had already decided I wasn't worth their investment. But understanding this painful truth about my family would ultimately lead me to discover something beautiful about the nature of real love and generosity. The most profound realization was understanding that my family's treatment of me wasn't a reflection of my worth as a person. It was a reflection of their capacity for love and generosity. I had spent years internalizing their indifference, believing that maybe I was asking for too much or expecting too much from family relationships. But seeing their selfishness laid bare through this test helped me understand that their limitations were about them, not about me. This shift in perspective was like putting on glasses for the first time. Suddenly, everything came into sharp focus, and I could see patterns that had been blurry for decades. Make sure you subscribe and hit that like button because what Aunt Martha taught me about true generosity will restore your faith in humanity. Have you ever met someone whose actions completely changed your understanding of what love looks like? Share their story in the comments because I think we all need reminders that good people still exist in this world. Aunt Martha didn't just offer me money when I needed help. She offered me a masterclass in what it means to love someone without conditions or calculations. Her immediate willingness to sacrifice for my well-being showed me a kind of love I had never experienced before, even from my own parents. What made Aunt Martha's response so powerful wasn't just her willingness to help. It was the way she made my problem feel like her problem too. She didn't treat my emergency like an inconvenience or an interruption to her life. She treated it like a crisis that affected the whole family, which is exactly how family should work. When I told her the truth about the lottery, she didn't get angry about being tested or hurt about being deceived. Instead, she understood why I felt the need to protect myself, and she was proud of me for being smart about such a life-changing situation. Her wisdom about money and relationships opened my eyes to truths I had never considered before. Money doesn't corrupt people, she told me that day. It just gives them the freedom to show who they really are. She explained that generous people become more generous when they have more to give, while selfish people become more selfish when they have more to protect. She had spent her entire life giving what little she had to others, not because she was wealthy, but because giving was simply part of her character. The most profound lesson Aunt Martha taught me was that true wealth isn't measured in dollars. It's measured in your willingness to share whatever you have with people who need it. She showed me that someone with a modest income and a generous heart is infinitely richer than someone with millions who won't spare a dollar for family. Her example became the blueprint for how I wanted to use my lottery winnings, and her influence would guide every decision I made about my newfound wealth. What she taught me about authentic love would ultimately inspire me to completely restructure my relationship with my family and my money. Beyond her lessons about generosity, Aunt Martha taught me about the power of consistency in relationships. Unlike the rest of my family, whose support was conditional and unpredictable, Aunt Martha had been a steady source of love and encouragement throughout my entire life. She remembered my birthdays, called to check on me during difficult times, and celebrated my small victories when no one else seemed to care. Her consistent presence in my life had been so reliable that I had almost taken it for granted. But this experience made me realize how rare and precious that kind of steady love really is. She had been showing me what real family looks like for decades, and I had finally learned to recognize and value it properly. If you're wondering how this revelation changed my relationship with my family forever, subscribe and like this video because what happened next will surprise you. Have you ever reached a point where you had to accept that some relationships in your life were based on false foundations? Tell me about your experience in the comments, because I want to connect with others who've had to make these difficult realizations about people they loved. The knowledge of how my family had responded to my fake crisis created a permanent shift in how I viewed and interacted with each of them. It wasn't anger that changed everything. It was clarity. And sometimes clarity is more devastating than any argument could ever be. My relationship with my parents became politely distant, like we were friendly acquaintances rather than family members. I stopped calling them with my problems, stopped expecting emotional support, and stopped feeling disappointed when they prioritized their own comfort over my needs. This wasn't about holding grudges. It was about accepting reality and adjusting my expectations accordingly. I continued to attend family gatherings and maintained cordial relationships, but I no longer invested my emotional energy in trying to earn their approval or support. It was like finally accepting that a broken appliance will never work properly, so you stop trying to fix it and find alternative solutions. The hardest part was watching my siblings continue their lives completely unaware that anything had changed. They had no idea that their responses to my request had revealed fundamental truths about their character, and they certainly didn't know that I now saw them through completely different eyes. My sister would still complain about her financial stress while planning expensive vacations, and my brother would still make jokes about family loyalty while demonstrating none. The conversations felt hollow because I knew exactly where I stood in their priorities, and it wasn't where I had hoped to be. But this shift in family dynamics also brought unexpected freedom. I no longer felt obligated to drain my energy trying to maintain relationships that were fundamentally unbalanced. I stopped making excuses for their behavior, stopped feeling guilty for not being close enough to family members who had never been close to me, and stopped sacrificing my own well-being to preserve relationships that existed more in my imagination than in reality. This newfound clarity would guide me toward building a completely different kind of life, one based on authentic connections rather than blood obligations that had never lived up to their promise. Subscribe and hit that like button if you want to see how life-changing money can actually change lives for the better when used with intention. Have you ever had the opportunity to completely reinvent your life and your priorities? Share what you would do differently in the comments because I want to know what matters most to people when they have the freedom to choose. With Aunt Martha as my inspiration and my family dynamics forever changed, I decided to use my lottery winnings to create the kind of life and legacy that would honor the lessons I had learned. This wasn't about revenge or proving points. It was about building something meaningful from the ashes of my old illusions. The first thing I did was quit both of my jobs. Not to be lazy or irresponsible, but to give myself the mental space to plan how I wanted to use this unexpected gift. I spent weeks researching charities, foundations, and causes that aligned with the values Aunt Martha had demonstrated. I wanted to find ways to help people who were struggling the way I had struggled, people who needed someone to believe in them when their own families had let them down. I discovered organizations that helped single mothers pay for childcare, programs that provided emergency financial assistance for medical bills, and foundations that supported people transitioning out of difficult family situations. I also made the decision to dramatically improve Aunt Martha's quality of life as a way of thanking her for showing me what real love looks like. I paid off her apartment lease and helped her move into a beautiful little house with a garden she had always dreamed of having. I set up a trust fund that would ensure she never had to worry about money again, and I made sure she had access to the best healthcare, regular vacations, and all the small luxuries she had been denying herself for years. Watching her face light up when she realized she could afford to take her church friends out for dinner whenever she wanted was worth more than any expensive purchase I could have made for myself. But the most important change I made was in how I approached relationships moving forward. I became much more discerning about who I allowed into my inner circle, and much more generous with people who demonstrated genuine character. I learned to recognize the difference between people who wanted to be around me for what I could give them and people who cared about me regardless of what I had. This new perspective on relationships would guide me toward building a chosen family of people who shared my values, and it would teach me that sometimes the family you create is stronger than the family you're born into. If this story has made you think differently about family, money, and loyalty, please subscribe and give this video a like, because sharing these difficult truths wasn't easy, but it was necessary. Have you ever discovered something painful about people you love that ultimately set you free to live more authentically? I'd love to hear your story in the comments, because I think we all need to know we're not alone in these experiences. After everything I've been through, I want to leave you with the most important lesson I learned. Sometimes the greatest gift life can give you is the clarity to see people as they really are, not as you wish they were. This lottery win didn't just change my bank account. It gave me the courage to build a life based on truth rather than hope. The hardest part of this entire journey wasn't dealing with my family's rejection. It was accepting that I had spent years trying to earn love from people who were never capable of giving it unconditionally. But once I stopped chasing validation from the wrong sources, I found genuine connection with people who valued me for who I am rather than what I can provide. Aunt Martha showed me that real family isn't about blood relations. It's about people who show up for you when it matters most. The chosen family I've built since then has given me more love and support than I ever received from my biological relatives. Money revealed the truth about my family's priorities, but it also revealed the truth about my own character and values. I learned that I'm someone who wants to use resources to lift others up rather than hoard them for security. I discovered that I'm happier giving than receiving, and that the real joy in having money isn't in what you can buy for yourself, it's in what you can do for others. Every dollar I spend on helping someone in need feels more valuable than anything I could purchase for my own pleasure. And that understanding has shaped how I want to live the rest of my life. Looking back, I'm actually grateful for the painful lesson my family taught me, even though it hurt at the time. Their rejection forced me to develop real self-worth that doesn't depend on other people's approval. And their selfishness showed me exactly the kind of person I never want to become. If you're watching this and you've experienced similar disappointments with family or friends, I want you to know that their inability to love you properly says nothing about your worth as a person. You deserve relationships built on mutual respect and genuine care, and sometimes you have to be willing to walk away from people who can't offer that. What would you have done in my situation? Do you think family obligations should override personal boundaries? And most importantly, what do you think money really reveals about people's character? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. And if you want to hear more stories about life's unexpected lessons, make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications. I'll see you in the next video, where I'll share what happened when I finally decided to confront my family about what I had learned. Trust me, their reactions were even more revealing than their initial rejections.